Was that a mistake on the warrant, or did someone just risk their badge to protect Sonny Corinthos? Tracy Quartermain's expression said it all. Ronnie managed to do the impossible and actually impress her. No small feat, considering Tracy has the emotional range of a gavel and twice the skepticism. They'll never braid each other's hair or exchange friendship bracelets, but credit where it's due. The writers finally gave Tracy a moment that made sense. Here is a woman who's barely unpacked her boxes in a new home, suddenly defending her newly expanded family, with the kind of fierce loyalty usually reserved for Monica. For once, the show remembered who Tracy is, a Quartermain to the bone, armored in disdain but built on devotion. Then there's the curious case of the search warrant, which might as well have been delivered to Narnia. The gym staffer, whose ties to the PCPD remain as vague as her moral compass, seems to have conveniently misread the address, a slip of the tongue, or a calculated favor to Sonny, that perpetually misunderstood mobster with more charm than scruples. After all, she overheard Drew's threats. Perhaps this was her quiet rebellion in a badge and ponytail. Of course, one can't help but wonder, are Dante and Chase the only detectives left in Port Charles? Chase serving a warrant at his own residence is less standard procedure and more sitcom subplot. The department's staffing crisis is becoming a running joke, just without the punchline. Still, the show finds its heart where it always does, in Sonny's quieter moments. His scenes with Gio are small gems, two men navigating loyalty, loss, and love with unexpected tenderness. Gio's unspoken tension with Emma lingers sweetly in the background, while Sonny's decision to take him in reveals a warmth that cuts through his usual bravado. Meanwhile, Ada Turner's mistake with that address feels a bit too convenient to be accidental. If she's not corrupt, she's incompetent, and neither bodes well for justice in Port Charles. And then there's the romantic subplot no one asked for, yet another attempt to pair Sonny with one of the interchangeable Brendabots, a term that should send chills down any long-term viewer's spine. Enough, truly. As for Ronnie, she's got spark, and the show would do well to keep her that way. A DNA test to confirm her connection to Monica might finally give her storyline the backbone it deserves. Until then, she remains what so few characters manage to be anymore: unpredictable, sharp, and genuinely fun to watch. Stop pretending anyone else could lead the Quartermains, because without Tracy, that family's a glorified Airbnb for lost storylines. If ever there were a woman destined to rule the Quartermain kingdom, it is Tracy. With her silver hair and sharper wit, she has evolved into the perfect fusion of her formidable parents. Edward's ruthless cunning remains intact, tempered now by flashes of Lila's warmth and emotional honesty, a balance that renders her both formidable and deeply human. Age has not softened her. It has refined her into something more dangerous, a matriarch who finally understands the value of both power and presence. Tracy's rightful place is at the head of this fractious dynasty, not merely inhabiting the house, but embodying its legacy. Watching her stride through that mansion feels like witnessing the continuation of a bloodline, an unbroken thread tying the Quartermains to their own chaotic glory. The idea of anyone else presiding over that home borders on sacrilege. Some whisper about Monica's will and which dutiful heir, Jason, Michael, or otherwise, might inherit the property. Realistically, yes, the house would fall to Monica's descendants, but emotionally, spiritually, dramatically, it belongs to Tracy. The walls practically recognize her voice. The notion that a boring interloper might replace her borders on the offensive. Whatever charisma Erica's character is meant to exude, it evaporates in Tracy's shadow. There's only one woman who can command that living room with the authority to silence an entire family brawl, and it isn't a newcomer with a polite smile. Tracy's presence transforms the chaos into order, the absurd into art. Still, even a monarch must consider succession. Jane Elliott has retired more times than most people have changed hairstyles, each time returning, thankfully, to rescue the show from its lesser selves. Her return in 2023 felt like the restoration of an empire. She has aged with the same grace that made Annalise Lila an icon, and the visual symmetry, white hair, regal bearing, only heightens the sense of legacy fulfilled. Yet one can sense the clock ticking. Should Elliot finally choose to wrest her crown, the show must decide who, if anyone, can stand as her foil. Skye would be a fitting choice. If only Robin Christopher weren't permanently retired. Celia might do in a pinch, though neither Lois nor Olivia possessed the emotional complexity to truly spar with Tracy. The Quartermaines thrive on controlled combustion, not genial cohabitation. Without a worthy counterpart, the energy of that household risks going cold. For now, though, Tracy reigns supreme. She is the matriarch the Quartermaines deserve, the living embodiment of their contradictions. Ruthless yet loyal, cutting yet compassionate, flawed yet fiercely protective. Whether she owns the deed or not, the house already belongs to her. All that's left is for her to say it, just once, with the authority only she can muster. "This is my house. Monica gave it to me." That single line would seal her legacy, not just as the family's caretaker, but as its enduring queen. They just rewrote 40 years of General Hospital history and called it a tribute. Soap operas thrive on improbable twists, but even by General Hospital standards, the sudden arrival of Ronnie, allegedly Monica Quartermaine's long-lost sister, feels like the writers dumped the family tree into a blender and called it plot development. The premise alone insults decades of character history. Monica has never once mentioned a sister, let alone one so dear she'd will her the Quartermaine mansion, an estate practically enshrined in Port Charles history. The house isn't some extra property to toss around like pocket change. It's the family's beating heart, gifted to Monica by Alan, who inherited it from Edward and Lila. That she'd suddenly bypass her entire brood, Tracy, Michael, Ned, Jason, even the resident freeloaders, and bequeath it to a woman no one has met stretches soap logic past its limits. And yet, here we are. The more charitable viewers propose that Ronnie may indeed be Monica's estranged sibling, one she avoided for decades out of shame or self-preservation. Monica, after all, clawed her way out of foster care and a messy past. Perhaps she saw reconnecting as regression. If that's the direction, fine. It would at least honor the emotional complexity Leslie Charleson gave the character for over 40 years. But that requires nuance, not the hackneyed mystery letter Martin Gray conveniently found under a pile of children's drawings at Drew's house. Speaking of Martin, his vendetta against Tracy has become the narrative's most irritating engine. The man's grudge-fueled obsession makes Tracy look like the sanest Quartermaine alive, which is saying something. Viewers can practically hear the writer's room chanting, "Make it about revenge," as if the only way to explain a forged will and a fake sister is through yet another petty scheme. If Martin and Drew really conspired to use Ronnie as a pawn to rob Tracy of her inheritance, the audience deserves a medal for enduring this recycled nonsense. Of course, some insist Ronnie is genuine, that Monica herself reached out before dying, attempting reconciliation with the sister she'd long buried emotionally. Maybe so. But why then exclude her from the funeral? Why lurk outside the family mansion like an intruder in her own inheritance? The story reeks of backfill, writers scrambling to retrofit emotional depth onto a retcon no one asked for. Even the casting reeks of desperation. Bringing in soap legend Erica Slezak as a character no one has ever heard of? A waste of pedigree. She should have been cast as a Cassadine matriarch, not parachuted into a plot that mangles the Quartermaine legacy for the sake of a week's worth of shock. And while we're on the subject of legacy, the writing itself has become the show's biggest villain. Characters vanish mid-storyline, logic evaporates, and long-term arcs are replaced with stunt casting and half-baked mysteries. Viewers are left watching veteran icons insulted by scripts that ignore decades of continuity. Alan's ghost must be spinning in the Quartermaine crypt. Still, there's something undeniably poetic about the chaos. Monica, the orphan who built her life brick by brick, now immortalized through a storyline about a possibly fake sister squatting in her house. If the key to the mansion truly ends up hidden in Tracy's jar of pickle Lila relish, at least the absurdity will be consistent. In the end, whether Ronnie turns out to be real, forged, or a fever dream of the writer's room, one truth remains. General Hospital has mastered the art of rewriting its own history, usually for the worse. The Quartermaines deserved a legacy story. Instead, they got a soap opera scavenger hunt. Never trust a soap funeral. They'll turn a scandal queen into Mother Teresa before the body's cold. It's fascinating how the passage of time and death transforms even the most chaotic of soap matriarchs into moral icons. Monica Quartermaine, once the tempestuous heart surgeon who made adultery a daily cardio workout, is now being canonized as the patron saint of Port Charles. Death, after all, performs miracles faster than any priest. Let's be honest, Monica's early years were a minefield of infidelity, deceit, and general hysteria. The woman married Alan for his money, pined endlessly for Rick Weber, lied about her child's paternity, and treated baby Jason like a defective appliance that had been mistakenly delivered to the mansion. The it she wouldn't let near the main house somehow became her beloved son in later years, a transformation that would make even the Vatican raise an eyebrow. Of course, Monica's trajectory wasn't entirely villainous. She was a groundbreaking female cardiac surgeon at a time when women were more likely to be nurses than scalpel wielders. She loved her children, eventually, and she did. Did, in the long run, become a pillar of the community. But the idea that she spent 4 decades as a beacon of grace and goodness is pure fantasy. Joan Rivers once said that after death, even the most scandalous people are remembered as saints. Suddenly, Princess Grace never drank. Monica, it seems, has entered that exclusive club. To the show's credit, her final farewell wasn't entirely sanitized. The eulogies and flashbacks made passing reference to her more scandalous escapades, her affairs, her fling with nephew Ned, her fiery battles with Tracy, but all were told with the nostalgic warmth of an old family photo album. Her worst moments were rewritten as charming anecdotes of a passionate woman. Murder attempts became lively marital disputes. The Lassa fever quarantine might as well have been a spa weekend. Still, this selective memory serves a purpose. Monica's character evolved dramatically over the decades, mellowing into a matriarchal figure that generations of viewers loved. Honoring that version, especially when both character and actress are gone, is less about historical accuracy and more about grace. After all, no one stands up at a funeral to declare, "My mother was a legendary homewrecker and an Olympic-level liar." What's more interesting is how this sanctification has spread like an infection through the entire Quartermaine clan. The family that once threw martini glasses and insults in equal measure has somehow been recast as Port Charles' moral backbone. It's particularly ironic given that Alan once tried to collapse a roof on Monica and her lover. Yet, compared to Sonny Corinthos, mobster with a heart of gold, the Quartermaines are now the city's patron saints of decency. In truth, Monica's life was a symphony of moral gray notes, no different from the others who populate this endlessly spinning moral carousel. Even Elizabeth, long painted as the show's resident angel, is guilty of more enabling and cover-ups than a corporate PR firm. The difference is simply one of timing. Decades of redemption and good deeds have a way of scrubbing even the darkest stains clean. So, yes, Monica was unhinged, self-serving, and occasionally cruel. She was also brilliant, ambitious, and fiercely loyal. When it counted, death didn't erase her flaws. It just gave everyone permission to pretend they were character development. The real Monica wasn't a saint. But in the peculiar morality of soap opera storytelling, sainthood is less about holiness and more about longevity. In the end, Monica's canonization feels earned, not because she was perfect, but because she endured. And in Port Charles, survival is the closest thing anyone gets to salvation. General Hospital just threw away one of the most poetic revenge plots in daytime history. And no one seems to care. The writers have a remarkable talent for forgetting their own history. Case in point, Rick Lansing, the man once notorious for locking Carly in a panic room, is now the one being held captive. And somehow, Carly isn't even part of the story. A missed opportunity of Shakespearean proportions, if Shakespeare had written daytime television with duct tape and bad lighting. The show abandoned this plot for nearly a month, leaving Rick languishing off-screen while Christina wandered around Port Charles as if she hadn't participated in a kidnapping. The tonal whiplash is impressive, but the real crime here isn't narrative neglect, it's the failure to recognize poetic symmetry. Having Carly among Rick's captors would have been perfect. 2 decades after he held her hostage, she could have returned the favor with a smirk and a locked door. That's not just good television, that's justice with flair. Beyond the symbolism, it's simply baffling from an entertainment standpoint. Alexis, Ava, and Carly are 3 of the most dynamic, unflinchingly committed women in the cast, portrayed by actors who never coast through a scene. Laura Wright, Maura West, and Nancy Lee Grahn could have turned Rick's imprisonment into a twisted masterclass in tension and wit. Their chemistry, acidic, volatile, utterly captivating, could have carried the entire storyline. Instead, viewers were left with a half-empty plot where the most interesting characters were conspicuously absent. It's not too late, technically. Carly could still discover Rick tied up and, in the best full-circle fashion, wordlessly close the door on him. That single silent beat between 2 adversaries, recognition, disgust, and mutual understanding, would say more than any monologue could. But it would still be a consolation prize for what should have been a main event. Some argue that Carly's involvement in too many storylines has worn out her welcome, and historically, they're not wrong. She and Sonny have long been the gravitational center of Port Charles, dragging every subplot into their orbit. Yet recently, she's been adrift, orbiting Michael's dramas and her increasingly suspicious romance with Brennan. For once, her insertion into a plot wouldn't feel like intrusion, it would feel earned. Still, others prefer seeing new faces get the spotlight. Christina and Ava's unlikely alliance is, admittedly, a refreshing development. It's just a shame the audience barely gets to see it. Rick's captivity sits forgotten in Alexis's garishly furnished basement, while Christina flits about town and Ava, who was supposed to be a co-conspirator, has apparently vanished into the ether. In short, the writers managed to fumble both a rich legacy callback and a chance to showcase some of the show's best performers. A Carly Rick reversal could have been poetic, deliciously vindictive, and emotionally layered. Instead, we're left with an off-screen hostage, a missing Ava, a carefree Christina, and the haunting question every viewer is asking: how do you mess up a storyline that literally writes itself? Don't fall for the smile. This isn't the Nathan you remember, and Britt Westbourne knows it. In the grand tradition of Port Charles Resurrections, Nathan West's miraculous return has triggered what can only be described as a collective existential crisis. Chief among the confused is Britt Westbourne, who, despite having once orchestrated embryo theft and prison escapes, now appears deeply rattled by her brother's reappearance. And for good reason. Whatever walked back into town may have Nathan's face, but something is decidedly off behind those sympathetic blue eyes. Britt's unease isn't simple shock. Her evasive behavior, coupled with that forced reunion scene, radiates the energy of a woman trying desperately to prevent a small child from hugging a biochemical experiment. The most generous theory is that she's protecting James from heartbreak. The less comforting one? She knows this Nathan isn't Nathan at all. Soap logic offers a buffet of possibilities. Cloning, brain mapping, mind control, take your pick. The show's recent fascination with frozen brains, especially phasons, practically begs for a science fiction subplot. One theory insists this Nathan is actually Peter August with reconstructive surgery, which would be poetic if one enjoys the idea of Maxie being romantically haunted, again, by the man who terrorized her. Another camp prefers the clone route. Morally absurd, yes, but at least a clone allows the show to keep Ryan Paevey's face around without sullying Nathan's memory with Faison's brain or Peter's smirk. There's also the Britt was working for Dad hypothesis, which places her in some shadowy resurrection project. It's an almost charming idea that the daughter of 2 supervillains might have decided to dabble in family science. Perhaps both siblings were cloned, and Britt's awkwardness stems from knowing she's only 70% herself and 30% lab-grown regret. Others suspect she and Nathan are both under the thumb of the mysterious C, a villain whose ominous initial apparently doubles as the most efficient way to drive online speculation into chaos. If Brit's strange protectiveness is any indication, she may be complicit, keeping her distance to hide the fact that her brother is either brainwashed, rebuilt, or both. At least the writers have ensured the plot's pacing remains appropriately torturous. Viewers are already predicting this mystery will stretch through multiple sweep cycles, perhaps even until civilization itself collapses, because nothing says General Hospital like dragging a reveal across 9 months and 2 presumed deaths. The moral debate among fans has been equally entertaining. Some insist that if this truly is Nathan, he deserves a chance to know his son, regardless of how many brain chips he's hosting. Others argue that James already has a stable father figure in Spinelli and doesn't need a resurrected cop-turned-science project complicating his therapy sessions. Both sides agree, however, on one sacred principle. Absolutely no one wants Peter August back. Still, there's something undeniably magnetic about Ryan Paevey's performance, the perfect blend of warmth and lurking menace that suggests a man capable of both bedtime stories and murder. If this new Nathan is a villain in disguise, he's at least the kind of villain who makes the descent look elegant. In the end, whether this man is a clone, a brain transplant, or the unfortunate host of Faison's neurological leftovers, Brit's fear speaks volumes. She knows what Port Charles refuses to admit. Every resurrection comes with a price, and this one might cost far more than a few tears and a DNA test. Until the writers decide which pseudo-scientific horror to blame, one truth remains consistent. No one ever really dies on General Hospital, but sometimes they probably should. Here's what no one tells you about Tracy Quartermain's hair. It's not just a style, it's strategy. There are few constants in the ever-shifting world of General Hospital: betrayals, resurrections, and Tracy Quartermain's hair being immovably, unapologetically up. Jane Elliott has built a half-century of television authority from behind that impeccably sculpted fortress of braids and twists, and naturally, the question arises, why does Tracy's hair never dare to rest upon her shoulders? To begin, Jane Elliott herself is an exercise in timeless elegance. Whether wearing silk or sarcasm, she exudes that rare combination of poise and practicality, qualities echoed in Tracy's disciplined hairstyle. Some speculate it's purely functional. Long, graying hair can be delicate, and a tidy updo prevents the breakage and frizz that come with age and studio heat. Others insist it's aesthetic. Loose hair, they claim, can soften the face too much, undermining the sharpness of a woman known for delivering insults like surgical strikes. There's also an argument that Tracy's style is a deliberate homage to her mother, Lila Quartermain, the matriarch who defined grace with her braided chignons. The resemblance is unmistakable. Both women's coiffures serve as visual shorthand for composure, tradition, and power wrapped in silk. In a world of scandal, Tracy's hair is her armor, every pin and braid a statement of control. Yet, on the rare occasions her hair has been allowed to tumble down, viewers have practically gasped. There she was, unguarded, luminous, human. From the 1980s disco days, yes, she once sweated through Richard Simmons's aerobics, to her softer 2000s looks opposite Luke Spencer, the glimpses of unbound hair suggested a Tracy temporarily liberated from her self-imposed rigidity. It's almost cinematic, the undoing of the updo as the undoing of the woman. Still, the practicality of keeping one's hair up cannot be ignored. Studio lights scorch hotter than hellfire, and there's no dignity in watching a Quartermain heir mop sweat from her brow. Many older women also prefer the neatness of an updo, less fuss, more focus. And let's be honest, Tracy Quartermain doesn't do fuss. Of course, there's always a camp advocating for change. A chic bob, perhaps, or the long, flowing look she sported in the early 2010s. The trouble is that these modern experiments risk diluting the very essence of her character. Tracy's tightly wound hair mirrors her tightly wound temperament. Letting it down would be tantamount to letting down her guard, and that's not something this woman has done willingly since Nixon was in office. Some viewers even read symbolism into her styling evolution. When Jane Elliott returned from retirement, silver-haired, serene, and uncolored, it was less vanity and more declaration. She wasn't hiding time's passage, she was styling it. The gray, the braids, the height. It's as if Tracy has transcended mere vanity and entered the realm of iconography. It's also worth noting that Elliott, along with Maura West, Ava Jerome, operates on a sartorial level leagues above the average soap wardrobe. Both women project such confident individuality that one suspects they quietly veto costume suggestions. Their looks are too tailored, too specific, too intentional to be mere department handiwork. Together, they form General Hospital's couturier axis, Jane's classic command paired with Maura's artistic audacity. Ultimately, Tracy Quartermain's updo isn't simply a hairstyle, it's a philosophy. It's restraint personified, wit contained, and history woven into every twist. Whether it's a nod to her mother, a matter of comfort, or an extension of character psychology, the result is the same. A woman who could devastate an entire boardroom or an entire family without so much as loosening a strand. And truly, why would she ever let it down? They didn't just bring Nathan back. They may have brought him back as Faison. Let that sink in. Only in Port Charles could a man die, get buried, and still manage to come back as his own evil doppelganger, possibly housing the brain of a deranged supervillain. Welcome to General Hospital, where death certificates are just set dressing and DNA tests mean absolutely nothing. The latest fan theory swirling around the soap's fever dream of a plotline is that Nathan West, the beloved, brooding cop and Maxie's lost love, might not be so lost after all. Unfortunately, his soul might have been hijacked by none other than his dear old pseudo-father, César Faison. The conversation began innocently enough. Viewers wondered whether the mysterious man haunting Britt and triggering her nerves could truly be Nathan, or perhaps Peter August. After all, his fixation on Maxie felt uncomfortably familiar, and Britt's horror upon seeing him didn't exactly scream family reunion. But this being GH, a simple look quickly spiraled into a full-blown conspiracy involving cloned bodies, memory mapping, and Faison's brain preserved in a jar. Because of course it was. Let's start with the brain. Ever since Kevin Collins decided to keep Faison's gray matter for research, fans have been waiting for that choice to come back and bite someone, preferably literally. Now, speculation suggests that someone extracted Faison's memories and implanted them into Nathan, an experiment reminiscent of the Drew-Jason mind swap fiasco. The result? Fatin, a Frankenstein mashup of Nathan's body and Faison's psyche. It's poetic, in a horrifying kind of way. Others have taken the theory even further into clone territory. Perhaps Nathan isn't Nathan at all, but a perfect duplicate grown in a Cassadine lab, equipped with his memories, DNA, and devastating jawline. After all, if anyone would think playing God is a fun weekend project, it's the Cassadines. The C that signed Britt's mysterious medication letter certainly isn't helping the paranoia. C could stand for César, Claudette, or clone. Take your pick. There's also the matter of Britt herself. Her unease reads less like grief and more like guilt. Some suspect she was forced to perform unethical experiments on her own brother, under orders from a shadowy figure, possibly Faison or a Cassadine patron. Her terror might not come from recognizing Nathan, but from knowing what's inside him. If that's true, her silence becomes its own kind of confession. The implications are grim. A resurrected Nathan tainted by Faison's essence would devastate Maxie, traumatize young James, and undo one of the few genuinely touching arcs GH managed in the last decade. Fans, predictably, are begging the writers not to desecrate Nathan's legacy, especially after years of identity swaps, brainwashing plots, and personality uploads that have turned the show into a psychological graveyard. Still, some cling to optimism. Maybe Faison's memories are fragmentary, allowing Nathan's true self to fight through. An echo of Drew's partial recovery from his own mind mapping. In that version, Britt's loyalty becomes part of a secret effort to save her brother from the monster lurking in his mind. It's tragically romantic in the most GH way possible. Of course, the wildest card in all this chaos is the rumor that Anders Hove, Faison's original actor, was spotted on set. If that's true, the writers may be gearing up for yet another resurrection. Because why settle for psychological horror when you can have an actual zombie patriarch stalking the halls of General Hospital again? At the end of the day, whether this man is Nathan, Peter, Faison, or a Cassadine clone named Caesar Jr., the point is clear. General Hospital has turned science fiction into family drama. Fans aren't just watching for romance anymore, they're performing autopsies on the show's logic. If Nathan truly is Faten, then GH may have crossed from soap opera into mad science experiment. And honestly, it's insane. But it's General Hospital, and that's exactly why no one can look away. What if Drew Kane wasn't the victim of a shooting, but the mastermind behind it? There's something distinctly off about Drew Kane's latest brush with danger. The circumstances of his shooting are less tragic ambush and more meticulously scripted melodrama. Who shoots a man already down, in the back no less, and walks away as if they've just completed a checklist? The entire scene feels suspiciously theatrical, as though Drew himself may have directed it. After all, the man's a Navy SEAL. Precision, control, and strategy are his trademarks. If he wanted a sympathy wound and a halo of victimhood to manipulate those around him, he'd know exactly where to place the bullet. But if this isn't Drew's masterstroke in self-victimization, the next best suspect might be right under everyone's nose: Willow. The evidence practically points a manicured finger in her direction. The gun, conveniently traced back to Edward Quartermain's private collection, was stored at the Q Mansion, a place where Willow has always floated in and out undetected. The Port Charles Police Department, in its usual display of selective investigation, seems to have collectively forgotten that fact. Their fixation on everyone but Willow reeks of intentional misdirection. Then there's the Shadow, the one caught during the shooting, small frame, hair up, eerily reminiscent of Willow's current look. Combine that with her peculiar proximity to Elizabeth's house, where she's been staying, and where police are suddenly showing up with questions, and the picture sharpens. Even her conveniently timed reappearances at the mansion, like the day Monica died, when Chase caught her creeping in through the kitchen, suggest a pattern of stealthy behavior. She may well have been attempting to return the murder weapon before getting caught. Of course, there's another possibility. Michael, the dutiful husband, conveniently parked outside Drew's home at the time of the shooting. Did he see Willow pull the trigger and decide to cover for her, protecting the mother of his children? In Port Charles, loyalty often trumps legality, especially when bloodlines and family names are involved. Still, the theory that Drew masterminded his own shooting refuses to die. His ego alone could justify it. A man with a savior complex as grand as Drew's might see a staged attack as the ultimate act of manipulation. A performance designed to elicit sympathy, ruin Michael, and reassert control. A brush with mortality could be just the PR stunt he needs to restore his image. And because no soap mystery is complete without an expendable wildcard, there's always Jacinda, the town's most conveniently returning character. She breezes back into Port Charles right before the shooting, likely unfamiliar with firearms, which would explain the sloppy shot placement. She's not essential to any major storyline, making her an ideal scapegoat. In the end, it's a toss-up between the delusional hero who might have orchestrated his own downfall, the anxious wife sneaking through kitchens with antique pistols, and the disposable newcomer whose timing is just a little too perfect. Whoever pulled the trigger, one thing's certain. In Port Charles, bullets are never random. They're narrative devices, and Drew Kane, whether he's the target or the author of his own tragedy, has made sure this one hits exactly where it hurts most. Stop calling it a love story. By the end, it was just trauma with a wedding ring. Few soap pairings have been dissected, resurrected, and rewritten as relentlessly as Jason and Sam, or as the fans affectionately, and sometimes obsessively, call them J-Sam. The duo's history reads less like a romance and more like a decade-spanning social experiment in chemistry, recasting, and executive meddling. Let's start with the obvious, their original love story. The early 2000s era was textbook soap magic. Brooding hitman meets fiercely independent con artist, tequila and dominoes fly. And somehow it all feels real. That initial spark was raw, unpolished, and perfectly mismatched. Jason caring for a pregnant Sam was the emotional backbone that turned a fling into something deeper. It wasn't glamorous, but it was human. The kind of story daytime television used to build its empire on. Then came 2009, the reunion. Fans remember it as Jasam's second coming. Stronger, sharper, and seasoned by heartbreak, the chemistry didn't just survive, it evolved. There was an ease between them, a sense that the storm had passed, and they'd earned their peace. For many, this was the definitive era, the moment when their connection finally outpaced the melodrama around them. But no soap love story survives unscathed. The baby dies, he gets the girl storyline drew more than a few raised eyebrows, feeling suspiciously like a recycled version of Jason's dynamic with Carly. Only this time, Sam filled the role. The critique isn't wrong. Had Sonny actually left Carly, Sam's loyalty might have looked very different. Jason was the consolation prize, not the first choice, and that stain lingered long after the credits rolled. Then came the great identity shuffle. Jason's death, the water, the skylight, and eventually, Billy Miller's turn as Jason, or Jake Doe, or Drew, or whatever the writers felt like that week. Miller's era divided the fan base. Some applauded the warmth and humanity he brought. Others never accepted him as their Jason. He may not have had Steve Burton's stoic intensity, but he gave Sam something Burton's Jason rarely did: priority. For once, she wasn't orbiting Jason's mob life. She was his life. That, in itself, was revolutionary. Of course, General Hospital being General Hospital, it couldn't last. Frank Valentini's arrival as executive producer ushered in what can only be described as the Zoolander era, where familiar characters were swapped for network imports, and storytelling took a backseat to stunt casting. Sam's obsession with Shiloh, Jason's endless brooding, and the return to status quo mob drama felt like a creative nosedive after years of emotional groundwork. Still, no matter the recasts, retcons, or ridiculous plot twists, Jasam endures, not because the writing has been consistent, but because the audience refuses to let them fade. Every era has its devotees: the Pure Beginnings, the 2009 Redemption, the Billy Miller reimagining. Even those who grew disenchanted can't deny the legacy. For many, the true ending came not with Jason's umpteenth death, but with that quiet moment, Sam and Jason in bed, reunited with their son, before fate and bad writing tore it all apart again. That's where their story should have ended. Not with explosions or identity crises, but with peace, the one thing Jason Morgan never gets to keep. In the Soap Opera Hall of Fame, Jasam remains a masterclass in both chemistry and chaos. Whether you loved the mobster years, the domestic bliss, or the Jake Doe confusion, one thing's certain: no couple in Port Charles has ever survived so many deaths, recasts, and creative detours, and still managed to make viewers care. General Hospital hasn't put Britt and Jason together in the way they were prior to Steve Burton's exit. General Hospital brought back Britt, but not the Britt that Heather Weber killed. Instead, Jason saved her from what happened in Croatia, bringing tense moments between the once chemistry-filled characters. It isn't like it used to be, and the buildup hasn't been satisfying. As GH continues to tell the story of what happened in Croatia, many questions arise. The biggest may be how Britt was brought back to life after she died in Liesel's arms. But more than that, there is something different about her reaction to seeing Jason when he arrived at the resort where she lived. Instead, their interactions have been tense and awkward. Their chemistry has evaporated, and their relationship seems forced. They should be happy to be together again after both believed the other was dead. He died saving her mom, and she died saving Jocelyn. Since returning to Port Charles, Britt hasn't received the warmest welcome. Liesel blew up on her, and Carly is less than thrilled to see her back in Jason's orbit. That could explain some of her different energy, but there's hope that things will return to what they once were. Jason has attempted to reconnect with Britt, but he has been met with hostility. She wasn't happy that he showed up in the first place, but she did call him when things got tough. Something more is preventing Britt from returning to a good place with Jason. When it was announced that Thibaut would return to GH, Britt fans were excited. They would finally get the couple they had been shipping. Jason and Britt weren't officially a couple, but their love blossomed and their fan base grew. Not having them together, or even vibing, has been a letdown. Even in the tender moments when Jason was vulnerable with Britt, she shut him out. When he told her Monica had died, she was a bit softer, but it wasn't what was expected. It seems the idea of Britt may no longer be in the writing room, and if it is, the way things are going, the interest will be long gone before they find themselves in bed together. Everyone has the same reaction over Ronnie getting Monica's house. Now that it's been revealed that Monica left her house, the famous Quartermain mansion, to her long-lost sister Ronnie, General Hospital fans are just as angry as Tracy over the turn of events. The Q mansion being left to Monica instead of Tracy has been a running joke on GH for decades, but now that Monica has passed, it's time for someone new to inherit Port Charles' most infamous home. While Tracy was the most obvious option, she believed the mansion would be left to the next generation of Quartermains and go to Michael. Of course, Jason was always an option to receive his family's home, as was Ned. But when Alexis announced the house had been left to Ronnie, even she seemed shocked and confused. This GH fan put it best when they wrote on X, "Nope, nope, nope. All the nopes in Nopeland." Monica would not leave her home to someone she didn't care enough to spend time with when she was alive over Michael or Jason. I call shenanigans. Others chimed in with their opinions of Ronnie. Sure, she's the real deal. I like Ronnie. I'm sure she doesn't want the house, probably end up giving it to Michael, a fan shared, while another joked, I mean, this is as soapy as it gets. But seriously, Ronnie gets the house. Okay, let Tracy loose. Get her, Tracy. Some appreciated the humor in the scene, with one fan writing, truly a classic Quartermain family moment, while another gushed over the Tracy versus Ronnie moment with powerhouse versus powerhouse. Also, next on GH, Dante and Anna compare notes and Britt lashes out. General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, October 9th, 2025, reveal someone's alibi crumbles. Where were they the night of Drew's shooting? Meanwhile, Nathan makes a declaration, and Jocelyn fudges the truth. On Thursday, look for Anna and Dante to compare notes. They must, once again, review each person of interest, because the investigation hasn't progressed much at this point. Well, the police commissioner and the detective apparently come up with something, because someone's alibi suddenly crumbles. Which POI story has holes you can drive a truck through? Nobody's story is that solid. Michael's alibi is especially weak, considering that Tracy knows exactly where he was. Doesn't mean Michael shot Drew, however. In other GH news, Port Charles residents are aware that Nathan has returned, or so they think. Despite DNA evidence confirming he is James Nathan West, there is still something off about him. But Nathan has now interacted with his family, including James. Father and son hit it off pretty well. So why do teasers reveal that Nathan makes a declaration? Maybe he suddenly remembers something, or he just makes it known he's ready to leave the hospital. This week, Jocelyn has had to deal with the Britch. Britt is using her knowledge to her advantage. She knows Joss is a WSB agent, and she also knows that Joss doesn't want her mom to know, so Britt has exploited this information. She's trying to parlay it into an all-expenses-paid suite at the Metro Court Hotel, because God knows nobody wants to live in an actual apartment when there's a luxury hotel room available. When Jocelyn fudges the truth, is it about getting Britt what she wants? She may end up lying to her mom or to Brennan. Meanwhile, Britt lashes out, which isn't surprising. She has been doing a lot of that since her return. It's her superpower, or maybe it's her supervillain power,